Listen, I have a word that I just feel like January we kind of get a little bit of an open season on what we do, but I do always like to preach about prayer in January, because I think prayer is where all of the difference is made, right? It's I know we do a lot of things, but that really doesn't amount to a lot. But God does a lot of things when we ask Him to, and I would like to just tune us up a little bit about that today. I want to encourage you not to make resolutions. Make prayers. Yeah. If you looked back at last year and saw yourself do things or think things or live things or eat things that you thought later, I shouldn't have done that, and you got up at the beginning of this year and you made a resolution, I am not going to, or I am going to. If your focus was you've already undermined yourself. You haven't got the power. You haven't got the ability. And if you're trying to change yourself, good luck, because the person who gets to do that work is you. And so far, you've been terrible at it. But I encourage you instead to make prayers. Instead of saying grand things about your different life, ask God for a different life. Ask God for a change in you. And I want to talk today about the upside down world of prayer. And we're going to be looking at some verses from Psalm 69. I personally have just been reading through the Psalms from Psalm 64 to 72 and rereading as David finishes off his ministry as the king and begins to write Psalms before his son Solomon takes over. And his last Psalm that he writes is for his son. I've just been thinking about all of the things that David learned about prayer, that he's just really different than what we think, than what I think. In fact, there's things in this prayer that I find highly uncomfortable, and I hope that you're going to feel like this is all back to front, and it's all upside down. It is not the way that we would normally pray, especially in public. This is how Psalm 69 kicks off. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters and the flood sweeps over me. I am weary with my crying out. My throat is parched. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. Have you ever been to a prayer meeting where you go with others for the purpose of seeking God and then you politely pray your prayer? There's rules, aren't there, for prayer in public? There's just sort of social things that you're supposed to follow, right? One is that you're not supposed to look like a crying, slobbering mess. I think that if you were sitting, I can imagine David has gone into the temple area. He's with his other people that have spent some time. Maybe there's some priests and some Levites and some other people that have joined him in this prayer time. And instead of David, you can imagine the king and everybody's bowing his king. Hello, very nice, and he's all looking very regal. And of course, he's an athletic man, so he's got a real swagger to his walk. And then he starts his prayer. And you immediately feel uncomfortable because this great king is no longer standing, but he's face down on the floor. He's blubbering and he's crying and he's kind of semi-screaming, shouting, "Save me, oh God! I am sinking! The waters have come up to my neck!" Have you ever felt like some people exaggerate? They kind of complain about stuff. I know that when I was a young lad, I'm one of 4 children in our family. So it was my brother and I are a year and a half apart. Then there's a 3-year gap, and then I have 2 younger sisters. And my next closest sister, Lana, was kind of like a nemesis to me. She was the one who stole the attention. She's the one who got, less trouble, so more praise. And I kind of felt like she kind of just got the sympathy. I felt like it wasn't fair. In fact, sometimes if you were like perhaps roughhousing as children all do, and my brother and I, seriously, we could come to blows and be bleeding and Mom wouldn't care. But if my sister ever got into the roughhousing and ever got physically harmed, she would come running to Mom with with her arm being cradled or something. I do remember this one instance where something happened to her arm. So she came running to Mom and she's like, Mom, Joey hurt, because I was called Joey back then. Joey hurt me. And then so we all, you examine the wound and it was very red. And my brother and I were convinced that she'd made it redder on the way to see Mom. Do you know what I'm talking about? She's asking the Australian cricket team for some sandpaper, and then too soon? David Warner handed some out of his pocket. So she's roughing it up, and she's come to Mom with this abrasion, and it's just horrible. And I was like, Mom, she wasn't like that. When we just had her, she wasn't like that. It's not fair. And you feel like there's a sympathy seeking about that. We see there's something about David's identity that he is refusing to ever say the term before God, she'll be right. He will only ever act like things are worse than he thinks. And I want you to think about your prayer life in that regard. When you go to God, do you sound more like the British aristocracy? Oh God, the world is in a terrible state, and I'm finding that it's quite distressing to me and my morality and the children in which I have. So I make my petition before you, God, in all of your honor and dignity, if you would possibly forbear to descend from upon thou thronest and come down among us and heal thy nation. Listen, sometimes when I hear people prayer, I kind of think, are you writing this as a poem? Are you making this stuff up? You've got to sound more desperate. And when I first read this prayer, Psalm 69, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, it must be terrible for David. And then I found that his Psalms, again and again, he never, ever once talks to God like things are okay. He always makes it like things are worse than you can imagine. Because do you know what David knows that we don't know? That things are not okay. She will not be all right if God doesn't come to the rescue. I want you to think about your life in this way. You are on the verge of calamity every moment of every day. The only one who doesn't know it is you. Anything could happen. Anything can go wrong. The cells of your body can betray you. The health of your organs can let you go. Your mental health, your family's health, your financial world can all kind of be disrupted in a moment. I think people were very shocked when COVID came and suddenly everything that they thought was so orderly became disorderly. Because we are not okay. And I want to say this very clearly. We are desperately in need of God's help more than we know. But because of the way that people are, we like to pretend she'll be right. She'll be right, God. I'll just throw a little prayer up to you. But that's not what David prays. In fact, David prays the reverse. He says it's worse than I can even understand. And so that attitude of she'll be right is upside down to this, it's worse than you think. Because the reality is we don't have the power to fix it. Only God can save you. And desperation adds power to prayer. Because God is listening to your soul as you pray. And if your soul is not in distress, will God respond? I think a lot of times in life, we are learning the lesson that we need God more than we can ever imagine. And every now and then you get a whisper of it when some tragedy sweeps past you and you nearly got caught. But the reality is we are in very deep need. But we don't like to be like that. And I think that's why the psalm goes on and he talks about this. He says, in verse 69, he says, "Let not those who hope in you be put to shame through me, O God of hosts. Let not those who seek you be brought to dishonor through me, O gods of Israel. For it is for your sake that I have borne reproach, that dishonor has covered my face. I have become a stranger to my brothers, an alien to my mother's sons. For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen upon me. Have you ever told yourself, pull it together? Or had other people tell you, hey, pull it together, pal? You know, David goes the reverse. He falls apart before God. There is this story in just before Jesus is going to the cross. And what's happened is he is going through the city of Jericho on his final journey up to Jerusalem, which is up the mountains. And he's heading uphill to Jerusalem. And as he's leaving the city of Jericho, a blind man calls out to him. And his name is, we call him Bartimaeus, but its name wasn't Bart. It's Bar, means son of. Timaeus, it means he's the son of Timaeus. So Tim's son is blind. And he hears that Jesus is approaching and walking past. And he's probably, he's blind, he's never seen Jesus, he doesn't know what he looks like. So someone tells him it's Jesus, and the only thing he knows is stories. This guy has healed people. So he starts shouting, Jesus, son of David, have mercy upon me. And everybody goes, hey, zip it, Zippy. Come on, you're embarrassing your dad. You're embarrassing us. Would you be quiet, please? And he refuses. He refuses. Everybody's shushing. And they're telling him, pull it together, pal. Have a bit of decorum. And he's like, a decorum be damned. I'm getting healed. I'm going to fall apart. I am going to throw myself in the road if I have to. Can you please point me to the road? Because I am not, this is my last chance. And he doesn't even know that Jesus is about to die. This is my chance to get healed. I am not passing it up. I don't care what you think. Because I think here's the problem. We are so worried about this word here. Reproach. We are far too worried about what people think. One time, David, he wants to bring the ark, which is the place that God's presence is known to be in, the ark of the covenant, the ark of God. Through the journey of the people of Israel, God's presence has always been with the ark, represented by the ark. And David wants the ark to come into Jerusalem. It's not in Jerusalem at that time, and in fact, it doesn't even stay through this story. But he wants it brought into Jerusalem. So they bring it, they blow it the first time, because they touched it, not allowed to touch it. The person dies. David has to do some work with God about that. And then they bring it in. So what does David do? He disrobes. He No. He takes off his regalia. Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that David was dressed up like a king. And he's like, no. There's no kings before God. I don't lead this procession as a king. I lead it as a man. And so he strips himself down to the clothes of a beggar, which is basically jocks. And David not only walks in front of the Ark of the Covenant, welcoming it into Jerusalem, he dances in his jocks. Now, from the window, his wife watches. And what do you think the wife thinks about David in his jocks? She's probably sick of seeing David strut around the royal manor in his jocks. You sitting here? I was going to sit there. You want to sit over there? Got a beard? She knows the way he walks past the royal mirror and looks at himself. Hey, hello. But the minute David disrobes, do you know what Michal thinks? What will the other women think? because she knows how hard it is to be a woman in a community. Everybody's concerned about your status, and everybody's concerned about how you look and how the people who give you your honor look. And so she gets mortally offended by that. David, I love it. So he goes, you call that undignified? I'm going to get more undignified. Just when you thought I had hit the low bar, we are going lower. Because this is it. We can either pull it together to look good, or we can be completely transparent and honest before God. But you can't do that if you're worried about what other people think. Because dependence on God is embarrassing. Reliance on God is not cool. One of the things, can I just pause for a second? One of the things that makes me as a pastor upset is when I see other pastors put on an image of success. Look at my wealth. Look at my looks. Look at my clothing. And there are great pastors who are humble, salt of the earth types. And I really admire them from that. Because even though they're constantly in public, they don't care about their public image. But there are others who are performers. And I think we are not here to make ourselves look cool. We are here to show how great our God is. And you cannot protect both your image and God's at the same time. To go humble like David did in becoming that broken man who will, in a sense, shame himself for the glory of God. It takes a great sense of knowing that I don't care what other people think. I depend on you, God. I don't know how many people have been persecuted for their faith, for the things that you do in obedience to Christ that other people mock. I became a Christian when I was 17-year-old in high school and made to the Lord a commitment that I would remain a virgin until I married. Do you know how much fun it is to be the virgin in the high school? And to, in all of my great, wonderful wisdom, to tell other people. And to make that a bold statement. I'm honoring my God in obedience to him. And so I got the mockery of others. There was one time I was in Vancouver and I went to an ATM and I put my card in as you do, and this was in the days when they were new things. So I put my card in there and I withdrew $100 and the money came out, but somebody had put $100 notes in among the 20s. So instead of 100, I got 180 because one of the should have got 5 20s. I got 4 20s and 100, so I got $180. And I was like, it was like 11:30 at night. The bank's not open. I'm like, this is so annoying. Because I've got to come all the way back down into the city to give this money back to this bank. So I went into the bank and I waited in the queue and I said, I don't have a form to fill. I don't know what form to fill in. I'm trying to give some of your money back. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, this is what happened. I went to the bank machine, gave me 20, it's supposed to be 100. Somehow somebody mixed up hundreds in with 20s, and I ended up with this 80 extra dollars. So can I give you this $80 back, please? They laughed at me. How stupid are you? Nobody knows you have this money. Nobody knows. And I said, I'm sorry, lady, but God knows. And I depend on God. I depend on him. If I'm out ripping off other people, he's not going to like it. I'm going to be in trouble. I can't have that happening. Because if he's going to whoop my butt over this, I don't want that. Plus, I depend on God. And I don't care what anybody else thinks. And I know that makes me look weak and dumb. You know what? Let me be dumb. But David says, it's rough. So the question is, are we trying to impress people or are we trying to impersonate Jesus? He says, when I wept and humbled my soul with fasting, it became my reproach. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I am the talk of those who sit at the gate, and the drunkards make songs about me. I mean, we don't have city gates anymore. We don't have places where all the drunks hang out. But maybe I haven't been around for a while. But the people who are the lowest, the people who are the smallest in the community, with the least honor, are the ones now making fun of David. And you know why? Because he made himself low. He wore sackcloth. He embarrassed himself. And other people took that moment to get their joy. You remember when Jesus was on the cross? And they're making fun of him? Oh, come down if you're so great. You know, oh, you called yourself the king. And Jesus is like, I am going through all of this because I am the king. I am doing this to save you. Oh, come down, save yourself and others. I can't save myself and you at the same time. But Jesus made himself low, so low, that a thief is now making fun of him. But such was his place before God that he went low, because we don't care about impressing other people. We care about moving the heart of God. Amen. So the truth is that strength, courage, skills, looks, all the things that impress are the exact opposite of what we need in prayer, which is weakness, fear, inability, and tears. Crying out, oh God, rescue me. I guarantee you this. I've been so many times like this, where I've been pouring out my heart before God in prayer. So much snow that the snot bubbles are forming. And my eyes are red, and I am crying. And the moment there's the knock at the door or someone interrupts me, the very first thing I do is I turn and try to clean myself up. Because I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to look weak. But the reality is that time that I spent before God in tears was the very thing that was the right appearance. And so Jesus, it says in the days of Jesus' flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplication with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. And although he was a son, he learned obedience, that is, compliant submission, through what he suffered. And the reality is, we don't like it when God makes us more dependent on him, because everyone else likes it when we look like we've got it together, and we like it too. So we don't like becoming weak. So the Apostle Paul, he said, when I was going through that time of weakness, he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And so Paul's resolution then is, therefore I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. When I'm weak, that's when I'm strong. But we have this inner revulsion to being weak. In fact, even when we look at other people who are weak, we go, ah. Years ago, I go for runs for exercise, and I have for the last 22 years. So when we lived in our other house, I had a running route that oftentimes took me up a very steep hill. And just to push myself, I would sometimes run up it and then run down it and then run up it and then run down it and then run up it. So one time, this is what's happening. I'd gone up for my run, and I'm like, okay, let's go for it. Man size today. So I ran up, I ran down, I ran up, I ran down, and I ran up. And the third time running up the hill, I saw my neighbors come around the corner at the top, who are here now. They were out for a walk. And I got up to the top, and I'm not a professional athlete. I was exhausted by the time I got to the top that last time, because, sometimes you're running uphill and you're just like, and your lungs are like, are you working? Are you working? Are you working? But I was so concerned about how I looked that by the time I got to the top, I was like, yeah, how are you? Yeah, going over a walk, oh yeah. Yep, just ran up the hill, yeah, pretty fit. That's what I thought, I wanted to fall on the ground. And the only thing that kept me up is, what will they think of me? You see, the reality is we don't like weaknesses. And the devil mocks weaknesses. And people in this community think less of us when we don't have it together and our Instagram doesn't read perfection. But the reality is God knows. And it's much better to appear in truth before God. Say, God, I'm not okay. Are we trying to be like Jesus or impress others? David says this is a perspective we need to have. He says, as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord. At an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love, answer me in your saving faithfulness. Deliver me from the sinking in the mire. Let me delivered from my enemies by the deep waters. Let not floods sweep over me or the deep swallow me. Remember what he started talking about? I'm up to my neck. I'm being ready. So he's saying, don't let this take me. Or the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, O Lord, for your steadfast love is good, and according to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Hide not your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Make haste to answer me. Now notice that in David's language, he is constantly talking about God helping him because it's an act of mercy. It's an act of grace. It's not a deserved thing. It's not an earned thing. Look at me, God, how I'm doing so well. Look at me, what I've done for you. Look at me. He's saying, every answer I ever get from you, God, comes because you are compassionate. You are full of mercy. God does not help those who help themselves. That's what the wives' tale, I don't know if wives actually tell that tale, but God does not help those who help themselves. God's help cannot be bought either with good works. God, our hope and our claim is his steadfast love and abiding faithfulness and abundant mercy. When we are praying, we are making an appeal to God's character, not our own goodness. We're never saying, look at me, God, look at me, unless to say, look at how low I am, look at how tough this is, look at my pain and misery. One of the things that I admire about our pastors here in our church is, and Tree, and where's Karen? She's in kids. And Matt too. But our campus pastors, one of the things that I admire about them is that God has made them weaker so that his power can shine in them greater. And what I like about them, like I really felt for Pete. Pete's eyes were fine until we asked him to be a pastor here in our church. And the moment Pete said, yes, Jesus, I'll serve you and carry more of the responsibility of loving and caring for your sheep, Jesus lets him go vision impaired. And I'm like, Lord, I need them strong. If we're going to lay a weight on them, I want them to be strong. I'm praying these prayers desperately and crying. When Rad said, yes, I'll be a pastor, immediately got chronic fatigue. And he couldn't work, and his digestive system was blowing up, and he's shrinking, he's at home, he's going broke. I'm like, people need to stop saying yes to me when I ask them to serve Jesus. But when I talk to Jesus, kind of one-on-one when we have that chat, and I go, Jesus, why are we having these people that you're signing up? Why are they having a hard time? He's like, do you want strong foundations or not? I'm like, yes, strong foundations. When Ash put his hand up to be a pastor the first time, he got the snot kicked out of him. And every kind of wrong thing happened to him. So much so it sucked the life out of him of, I can do this. And he became why does this happen? But see, what God does is, if you let him, he will actually make you weaker. so that his power can shine in you. If you let him. But there's not many people who let him. And the Apostle Paul had thorns in his flesh, as he labeled them. And he's like, Jesus, can you take these away from me? I can be so much more effective for you if you just take away these thorns in my flesh. And Jesus goes, you're fine, I'm with you. I got grace for you. I got a power that only works in weak people. Do you want to be weak? And Paul's like, yes, please. That's where it's all at now. I want to talk about my weaknesses. And the last thing that David draws our attention to in his psalm is this, is what's happening or what you're doing in your life, is it wearing you out or is it building you up? And this is how he says it. Draw near to my soul, redeem me, ransom me because of my enemies. You know my reproach and my shame and my dishonor. My foes are all known to you. Reproaches have broken my heart, so I am in despair. I look for pity, there's none. And for comforters, but I found none. They gave me poison for food. And for my thirst, they gave me sour wine to drink. In that last line, he prophesies the crucifixion of his son again. And in fact, if you look at the beginning of this psalm, it's set to the tune of Lily in the Valleys, which is the same song as the song that the crucifixion is set to in Psalm 22. You see, what David is doing, he's talking about how much everything else in life breaks his heart, but God restores his soul. And the reality is that worldly pressures and the demands for performance wear our souls out. When you have to work to earn God's favor, it wears you out. But if you know that God is a favoring God, you don't have to work for it. So you don't wear yourself out. When you are working constantly to make yourself look good in front of other people, take positions that make you look better, do jobs, dress in certain ways, have certain things, have all of this image going on, that is exhausting to your soul. And the worst thing it is it makes you a hypocrite to yourself. And there's nothing more destructive to the soul than being fake. And Jesus wants to bring us back to that place where who we are, God knows. And you see that David's he's like, Lord, I want you to come near to me. Please just come near to me, because I'll be full of laughter in life then. I'll be full of joy and enjoyment about life. And I won't worry about what everybody's thinking, and I won't be in this spin about me, and look what I have to do. So, I'm just thinking about how honest to be. It's very easy for me to pretend to have it together, because I know that people don't want to go to a church where the pastor doesn't have it together. Is that not true? So I have to be careful in what I say, but I don't have it together. I depend on God all of the time. I'm desperate for him. When I did this year's budgets for the finances that we need to do our ministries for next year, I got to say, for the last 5 years, every time I did a budget, I would go into a panic. And I would think, how am I going to get this done? How am I going to make sure there's enough money to pay all the bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And the Lord, every time the Lord's like, you didn't need to do anything. Thanks for trying to be responsible, but I got this. And I had to go, tear it out of my hands. The Lord is ripping it out of my hands, going, no, this is mine, not yours. And I'm like, give it back to me. I'm going to fix this. This year when I did our budgets, because I've learned this, I just folded them over and I laid them on my desk. I put my hands on them and said, God, we need a lot of money. You better pay the bills. I release them to you because I admit I have no power to make this work. I have nothing. But I cried out before God that he would do a miracle and we would have all that we need. There are people that I care about deeply that I cannot fix. So I take them before the Lord and say, Lord, only you can fix this person. Only you can change this. But I humble myself and I'm broken before the Lord because I can't do it. And I think that David's psalm, because the Psalms are written so we would learn how to pray. That's what they are. They are a prayer book. And in the Psalms, David goes low, 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 low. And he doesn't worry about what other people think. He cares about what God sees, what's in God's heart. And he makes himself a pauper in God's kingdom so that he will be dependent on God for God's blessing. And I would love for us to have a year where we just desperately seek God in prayer. That's why we're starting our year with prayer and fasting, because fasting is just saying, God, we're going to give up stuff because we want to recognize that it all comes from you. Unless you help us, nothing will change. Unless you do something in me, it will not be okay. Unless you. We're more and more dependent on God and less dependent upon ourselves because we need to be in that humble place before God and crying out in tears, God, help us. Where's your heart at? Do you think that you could pray deeply and desperately despite what other people think? Do you think you could confess openly and honestly, even if it brings you kind of a sense of shame and reproach? Do you think you can go low and be weak? Well, see, that's what the challenge of that prayer and that psalm is. To pray like we're being flooded and that we're in over our heads, and that God is saying to you and us today, that is the prayer that I hear. Where's your heart? Father, oh Lord, we are desperate for you. Lord, if you don't do something in our lives, in our worlds, in our hearts, in our bodies, Lord, if you don't rescue us, if you don't heal us, if you don't help us, we've got nothing. We've got nowhere to go. You are the only one that can do the miracles required. You are the only one that can reach this community for the gospel's sake. You're the only one that can disciple the broken. You're the only one who can heal people who are falling apart. Lord, even the people who don't know how bad they are, Lord, you know how bad they are. So our prayer today, right now, Lord, is that you would see that we're desperate for you. What is the thing that you're desperate before God for? What is the thing that you know that you need, God? That you would literally be able to say, I am going under without you, God. The floodwaters are going to cover me, and I am not going to survive without your help. Or have you become so self-sustaining that you live a life where you don't need God? Do you think that's the truth? Or do you desperately need him to change you from that self-sustaining, self-supporting mentality, false belief? Do you need God to change your heart and create a revival inside of you? God, I pray that you would move in people's hearts and that every person would get that revelation that David had, that we would know that we are desperate for your help, even though, like David, he was the king and he had resources all over the place, but he still knew that without you, he's nothing. Lord, I pray that you would give us that desperation for you. And Lord, I pray that by your Spirit, you would move that through all of our churches, and that every person that's part of our church would pick up that desperate need for you, and that we would begin to pray and to begin to call on you and turn to you for the revival that only you can bring. Lord, you are the one that we are depending on, whether we know it or not. So I pray, Father, for a transformation in our prayer lives and on our desperation before you. And Lord, I pray that you would bring us to our knees in crying out to you and not concerned about what the rest of the world thinks or how they do things. So Lord, we pray for that transformation in our spirits, Lord. Even now, Lord, as we spend some time in worship, Lord, may they be a cry of desperation, Lord, and not just a song to sing. Lord, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.